Thank you again very much, ladies. I think we have actually quite an impressive panel, and I think we're really going to share a lot today and get to learn a lot about each other. I mean, just going through your bios, I got to learn a lot about you guys, and I didn't know Prue played basketball, but yeah, but these are things we learn along the way about each other. So I think without further ado, I think we're going to start with DJ Prudence, known as DJ Prue, who's a club DJ basketball player, which I found out the other day. And, I got to know you based on, basically the work that you do. But what really caught my attention with regards to you is your journey in depression and understanding what made you tick and what made you step out of it and what made you make decisions for yourself. So if you could please just, share your journey with us and share your journey with our viewers to also help them understand that it is part of normal life and we can overcome it. And how did you overcome it?
Thank you so much, Munira, for that intro. Good morning, everybody. I'm truly honored to be part of the panel. As Munira did mention, my name is Prudence Matibula, better known as DJ Prulove. I am a radio and club DJ. And as she also mentioned that I am into sports as well. I'm a basketball player, and I've also had some influence in soccer. I've also played netball, swimming. You mentioned it. I've always been that girl. I've been that girl from a young age that would participate literally in everything. So in school, I was academic, I was into sports and arts and culture. So, in terms of my journey with depression, I was diagnosed in 2010 with clinical depression and stress. This was after I was involved in a car accident. And it was quite a journey because when it did happen in 2010, I had a car accident, but I wasn't admitted into hospital immediately after the accident. So after my accident, I decided to just see a doctor. And what happened is that my car was actually sandwiched. It was hit in the front and back. So I had a lot of neck pain, back pain. I went to the doctor. He put me on painkillers. And after taking the painkillers, I didn't get better. So after about 3 days, I then went to another doctor, to get a second opinion. That's what I went to my family doctor actually, and he also put me on painkillers, and I still didn't get better. And that's when he recommended that I go see a psychologist. And I thought, whoa, that's weird. I've got back pain and neck pain. What does a psychologist have to do with back and neck pain? But you know what? I was in so much pain. I was willing to try and do everything and anything. And besides, I also had a negative attitude towards psychologists because I've always believed that psychologists, well, I also call them shrinks, they tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you want to hear, and they literally tell you what you've already told them. So you tell them, they tell it back to you. Yeah, I mean, from the sessions that I've watched on TV, it just never made sense to me. But there I was. I went to the psychologist, drove myself there, by the way. Um, and yeah, after the first session, I was skeptical. And it was in the second session that we did an assessment and it came back. And that's when I was diagnosed with clinical stress and depression. And I was kind of confused. I was confused because I had driven myself there, number one. Number two, I was very functional in terms of me going to work on a daily basis. I was doing my daily duties. So when I was diagnosed with clinical depression, it really didn't make sense to me because my understanding of depression was that it's probably someone that's about to commit suicide, someone who's about to hang themselves or about to jump off a bridge. And there I was functioning, and I'll say functioning in inverted commas. So what happened then is that the doctor admitted me into hospital. It was initially for the weekend. So I also again drove myself into hospital, admitted myself into hospital. And what was supposed to be a weekend ended up being an entire month. It was 31 days. I was put on antidepressants for about 4 months. So you can imagine, like, from the initial consultation with the psychologist, where I went there, just skeptical. Next thing, I'm on antidepressants for 4 months. So in terms of depression, especially coming from the Black community, we really do have a negative connotation and understanding of depression. We don't really understand depression. First and foremost, especially when you speak to your parents, Black parents are like, what? There's food in the fridge, you've got a job, you've got a car. How can you be depressed? That doesn't make sense. And I guess I also didn't know of anyone personally who was going through depression. So that was also kind of tricky in terms of me truly getting an understanding of what depression was. And I only got to really learn about depression when I was admitted into hospital. And when I was in hospital, I actually went back, I backtrailed, where just a couple of weeks actually prior to me getting the accident, I recall there was a conversation I had with my best friend, and my best description of what I was going through, I told her that I was seeing black. And she thought, black? What? Are you losing your eyesight? Is there something wrong with your eyesight? And I told her that I can see clearly, but I'm seeing black. I told her that I felt like I was in this deep, dark ditch, I couldn't get out of it. Everything around me was just black from the moment when I wake up, emotionally, psychologically, physically, everything was just black. And that was my best description of depression, because I feel that versus the medical term of depression, we've heard about it, we've learned about depression according to medical terms, but I wanted my own description so that I could get a better understanding of it. And for me, that was my description, that I was seeing black. And yeah, being in hospital, having to go through the counseling session, it was tough. It was really difficult because you literally have to face your demons. You have to go within yourself. And I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of. A lot of people do not want to spend time by themselves. They don't want to dig up all the pain, because here I thought that it's going to be a quick thing, in and out. I mean, I was being admitted for the weekend initially, so I thought, I'm going to go in and out. But unfortunately, that's not how it went. We had to go back all the way to my childhood. And yeah, it was painful. It was painful because you have to go through some of the painful things that happened to you as a child. And I discovered that there were many things that I have been through in my life. I recall the doctor, the psychologist even mentioned that, girl, you've been through so much. How do you keep on moving on without seeking counseling? And I've always been that person. I've been that get up and go type of girl, because remember, we are strong women. So, with all the traumas that I went through, I never stopped to take stock. I never stopped to mourn the trauma. I never stopped. I was that girl that would keep on going. I would always keep on going. And I think that partly it was because I was, I would say, labeled the top achiever, the overachiever, because from a young age, as I mentioned prior to us going live, is that I was that kid that did everything and excelled in everything. So in school, I excelled academically. I mean, I was always in the top 10. I even matriculated as the only Black top achiever in our grade. Um, I was doing well in maths most of my school life. I was the maths girl. So because of that, everyone expected me to be something great. They expected me to be a president, a doctor, this and that. Again, in sports, as I mentioned, I played basketball. I did exceptionally well in basketball. I was usually the MVP. So you can imagine. And I also did ballet. I was the only Black girl that went on to ballet exams. So when you are the only this, only that, and even socially, I was that girl, like, the party doesn't start until I arrive. So having so much pressure around me meant I felt that I was never allowed to fail in life, because the pressure was coming from my parents, my friends, my neighbors. It was everyone, family members. So I never allowed myself to fail, which is why I had lived my life in that way, whereby there was no break. I just had to continue excelling. I had to just continue with life. And I recall one of the incidences that took place in my life was when I was 19 years old. I had an appendix operation that went septic. Um, so what happened is that I went in. I actually went to a doctor with just abdominal pain, and then the doctor diagnosed that yeah, there's something wrong. So he said that I needed to go to hospital, and before I could even go through the whole process of being in hospital, I collapsed. And that's when I was then taken into the theater room at the age of 19. They had to wait for my parents to sign forms, but they told me that my appendix had already burst. So we were literally in the crucial stages of saving my life. So they had to wheel me into theater. And yeah, I went into theater. Well, fortunately, they were able to save my life, but unfortunately, it only happened, I think, 3 weeks later when I was already discharged and I was at home, and I had to take out the stitches from the operation, that the doctor realized that my wound was not healing very well. Like my wound was pitch black, like the top I'm wearing. And he was very concerned. And the next day, literally, pus was starting to come out from the wound. I was rushed back into hospital. And when I got into hospital, ooh, it was drama. Literally, I've never experienced anything like that. And I don't think I know of anyone who's gone through that. My abdomen exploded open. The operation exploded open. And thereafter I lost my breath, was went back into theater, was in a coma. And after coming out of the coma, I had to learn how to walk again and be in hospital for I think it was a month again. And this the second time it was really bad because the way I describe it, I say I was crying for lunch, for breakfast, lunch, and supper because I was always crying. And the doctors were like, "Oh my gosh, this child is always crying. How can we make things better?" Because I was in so much pain, emotional, psychological, physical pain. And imagine, even after going through that, I never had counseling, never saw a psychologist. So those were the type of things that I've been through so much trauma, and I never really got to seek psychological help. And that's where in 2010, yeah, I would say the volcano erupted because there were many, many things that I went through thereafter. I had my grandparents passing away, one after the other. My cousin passed away. I was involved in car accidents. There was just too much. There was just too much for me at such a young age to be going through that. And I guess, yeah, in 2010, that's when everything erupted. And yeah, my experience in hospital, it was a very good one because I learned to claim back my life, to be the author of my own life and not let people dictate to me how to live my life. And more so, to be my own best friend. I guess that was what was missing in my life. I was always surrounded by people because remember, again, being this overachiever, I was very popular. I was actually an it girl. So you don't really get to connect with your true self. You never get to be your own best friend. You never get to be your own critic because you've got everyone else that's doing that for you. You've got your own cheerleaders there. So I needed to take back that control and be my own cheerleader so that I can criticize myself, so that I could also then, determine the trajectory of my life. And for me, that was actually the best thing that happened to me. I know it was the most painful thing, but a lot of good came out of it. And also, with knowing that depression is also incurable, it has also helped me to understand that I need to watch out for triggers. So what I do on a daily basis before I go to bed, I monitor my mood. So I'm constantly monitoring my mood, knowing that should there be anything, because sometimes, you can just become sad for no reason. So you need to go back and find the root cause of it. And yeah, I found things such as news because I loved consuming a lot of news. Like I would watch a news bulletin over and over and over again, and that negativity would drain me. Hearing all these negative news, children being raped, women being killed, those were things that would just drain me emotionally without me even realizing it. So yeah, identifying the triggers and also writing. I write a lot, you know. It has helped me in a huge way, especially when it comes to things whereby I don't feel comfortable talking about them with people. And yeah, being my own best friend, I talk to myself a lot. And I know people are like, woo, depression, yeah. Because again, people believe that, remember that because depression is a mental illness, they also associated with being crazy or psycho. So that's why other people are actually afraid to talk about it because of the stigma attached to it that, whoop, you mention it and automatically people think that you're going psycho. And being in a wellness ward, I was exposed to other people with other mental ailments like schizophrenia. It's scary. I won't lie. It's really scary because you're with a person that is normal one moment, and then the next they're talking to themselves, they're hearing voices. So it is scary initially, but once you get an understanding and an education about it, it equips you to know better, to and also know exactly how to handle such mental illnesses and such people as well. So yeah, for me, that has been my journey. And it was tough. It was tough because I only started talking about my journey this year. So imagine 10 years. It's been difficult to get to a point where I feel comfortable talking about it. To be honest with you, I've been dragging the process. I just didn't feel comfortable. So before I even spoke about it, it was a lot of prayer. I prayed to God about it because, again, you know, saying something like this, you know, putting it out there, you never know how people are going to react to you because of the stigma again. And once I started talking about it, it was shocking how many people started inboxing me, WhatsApping me, telling me that, yo, wow, you're so brave to talk about it. I'm going through depression and I will never get to a point where I'll speak about it publicly. And I'm talking about some of the celebrities that we know of in this industry, you know, people that we look up to. They were inboxing me saying that they're scared of talking about depression because, again, because it's incurable, they feel that they'll be judged. Because what happens when they've got another episode? So for me, I'm comfortable with that, that I've come out in the open. And should I go through another episode, I feel that I'm better prepared to deal with it. So again, it's also making sure that people feel comfortable talking about it. More than anything, for me, I don't want another person to commit suicide because they believe that they're all alone. We've got such a high suicidal rate in South Africa because of people that feel alone because of the depression. So speaking out, I'm really, really hoping that someone can take this message, take the courage and say, you know what? Prue Love spoke about it, so I don't have to suffer alone.
Wow, that was actually, it's amazing and it's true because when you are always the strong one, or when you're always the it girl, or the one that seems to people look at you like you have it all together all the time, it's so difficult for you just to be able to say, I need help. I I'm not okay because everybody looks up to you to always be okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll come back a little bit later. I just have one comment though. It's actually a parent who says, it's Sister Ndlovu, who says that it's very difficult to have a child going through mental health. I have a child who went through it as well. And as a parent, you don't even know how to behave around your child because you're the only person he or she can trust. But eventually we ended up fine. And it's so important for parents to understand that. And I know what you're saying when you're saying, when it comes to Black people and Black parents who don't understand that. I was actually, and maybe I shouldn't have laughed at it, but I was watching one of the memes the other day on, I think it was Snoop Dogg or something, and this like acted out, and this kid says, the parent comes in and is like, hey, I believe you're not feeling well. And the child says, yeah, I think I'm a bit depressed and this and that. And they're like, oh, okay, go and depress those dishes. But that's how it happens more often than you think. So to have a parent who understands that and understands that I need to be there for my child through this because it's not something I understand but it's something my child is going through and I need to help them through it. It'll really help that child grow up to be a more rounded adult and to also accept what they're dealing with and how to cope with it throughout life. Thank you very much, Prue. We'll come back to you a bit later. Thank you, KG, so much for joining us. We'll be chatting shortly. Always great to have you. Always great to have you in our shows with your insight. Um, but yeah, we're going to go over to the doctor that never left Tux. Not the doctor, sorry, the psychologist that never left Tux. I call her a doctor. I see it, okay? The sports psychologist that never left Tux. She did her undergrad, honors, and masters at UP. And she's also looked after quite a lot of provincial, regional, and international teams, or national, South African national teams at international level. And thank you so much, Marshallise. I think it's always best when you tell us who you are and just take us through, what is it that you go through on a daily basis? What advice can you offer? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Munira, for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about mental health. Yeah, just a brief history. I think you've said everything already, but yeah, I'm waiting for Tix to offer me shares. Hopefully, they'll get back to me quite soon. Yeah, so I'm the sports psychologist at SEMLI, or the Sport Exercise Medicine and Lifestyle Institute at the University of Pretoria, and I get to work with individuals in the sporting context, but also just your regular Joe out on the street. I also work with teams, so I'm very fortunate to be able to work with the general public, but also people in sport. And I really enjoy working with athletes because yeah, I just think the sacrifices they make, it's tremendous, and they often do it with very limited support, and I have a lot of respect for that. My interest is specifically women in sport, and then also hypnosis. And the last thing that I'm very interested is in performance enhancement. So how come is it possible that two athletes train at the same level, they have the same nutritional outlooks and approaches? How come is it possible that one is successful but the other one is not? So that those are some of my interests. But to get back to the topic today, sure, Prudence, I was so touched by you sharing so vulnerably. I've got tremendous respect for that. And I can hear that it's really empowered other people and given them hope. And for me, that's the biggest thing about depression, is that it steals hope. It's a very hopeless feeling. You captured it so beautifully with that dark, that blackness that you just see. It just feels like life has lost all of its color. Nothing is enjoyable anymore. Just getting out of the bed is effort for some people who suffer from depression. And it's a silent illness, in that people are too scared to speak about it because of the stigma surrounding it. A lot of people deem it as, if you have depression, you're seen as weak, which I think is a big misconception, because the people that I work with who are depressed, who manage to get out of bed, I have the world of respect for them, because it's just not that easy. Things we take for granted, for someone who's depressed, it really requires a lot of effort and a lot of focus for them to just get through the day. So yeah, in terms of depression, it's scary to see the statistics. It's definitely on the increase, especially after COVID. We're seeing a lot more people suffering from it. People are not willing to, or are too scared to ask for assistance. And sometimes by the time they do ask for assistance, they've really hit rock bottom and they're struggling. And like Prudence has also said, um, it's a chronic mental health illness. So it will ebb and flow. It's just like diabetes. It's something that you monitor. And Prudence, I hear that you monitor your mood beautifully. It's about checking in with yourself, checking, how am I feeling? I'm feeling sad. What happened? Did something trigger it? Or I'm feeling lethargic. Is there a specific reason for that? So it can be monitored. And I think, Prudence, you are proof that even with depression, you can go on and still reach your potential and enjoy life. There are moments of enjoyment. And yeah, it's just something to be constantly aware of and to monitor. So in terms of, yeah, for some people, they will say, yeah, I don't know why I'm depressed. I've got everything. I'm happy. I'm doing well in my job. I'm actually starting new ventures. Everything's going well, but I just don't understand why I'm not feeling, I'm just feeling blur. Teenagers will often tell me they just feel blur. There's just it's just a sense of numbness or a sense of nothingness sometimes. And yeah, that's usually how it starts, and they sort of dismiss those feelings. And then when they start talking to parents or they start talking to the significant others in their lives, sometimes, unfortunately, these people are dismissive of their feelings as well. And it's like, ach no man, but you'll feel better tomorrow. You know what, the sun will come up tomorrow. Ach, just pull up your socks. It's not that bad. Everyone's going through being a teenager, and it sort of gets justified or explained away, which again, you can imagine that if you're feeling low and you hear that, it just really takes the wind out of your sails completely. And you start feeling even more demotivated, powerless, and really feeling like you'll never get out of it, that no matter how hard you are trying to get out of it, it just feels like you're sinking more and more into this feeling, and nothing, your usual coping mechanisms are just not working for you as effectively as they did previously in your life. And Prudence, what you also mentioned about sometimes the top achievers and the it people suffer from it, but they realize it or accumulate it and realize it way late. So it's like a can of Coke that you just shake. So it's the one thing, it's the next thing, it's the next thing, and then boom, something's got to give, and then people are shocked. Like I never saw this coming, or never could understand it. It's not you. That's just not possible. What do you mean? And because there's so much misinformation, people immediately judge. And people then, especially people who are depressed, because it takes so much energy to engage, they just withdraw even further. But it is sometimes that we are not taught. We are taught to be successful and driven, but we are never taught how to deal with failure. And then one moment or two moments of failure, we allow it at times to define us. And then when it hits, we completely at a loss of how to deal with it and how to get ourselves out of it. And then there's help available. But I had such a giggle, Prudence, when you explained what psychologists do. Yeah, we have a bit of a bad reputation in TV series. But yeah, then people are reluctant to engage. And sometimes, especially when I work with teenagers who are depressed, of course, there's an urgency to improve the mood for the athlete or the person, the teenager, to just feel better. And yes, that's definitely the first line of what we want, but sometimes it's just not that easy. There's no quick fix for depression. You have to work hard, and it's scary, and it's painful looking at yourself in the mirror and going, sure, this I could have improved on this. I was that this wasn't my fault, and forgiving yourself, it's hard, and it's not something that comes easily. So with depression, it's often treated sometimes. Just engaging in therapeutic sessions is sufficient, and someone can lift it, and they can work, and they can get to a point where they can manage their depression effectively. But in most cases, it's yeah, the medication and the sessions work hand in hand. So the way I explain it to people is just that, why do you want to walk a mountain barefoot? Um, that is why medication is oftentimes needed. So to just assist, to just take off that edge so that we can work therapeutically. Because sometimes just for someone who is depressed to get to a session, it's very draining, and it really takes a lot of their effort to just get there. So that is usually how depression is treated, and the person is assisted to get through this journey. And from there, the coping mechanisms vary. Every person's experience of depression is very unique. One of the things that we know from research that is important is to have a support structure in place that acts as a bit of a buffer. But it also helps to be able to just phone someone and say, you know what, I'm having a terrible day. I can't put my finger on it yet, but I'm struggling. And to be able to get an empathetic response of, I can hear that you're not yourself. Try and hang in there. Do you want to go for a coffee to break that isolation that comes with depression? So the support, having a support system around you, and people who can understand what you're going through, is very important for the journey with depression. Also, exercise helps with the endorphins, that feel good feeling that you get, but that usually only comes later on when the person has more energy available to actually go out and exercise. The writing that Prudence spoke about works beautifully because it just gets you out of your head a little bit, and gets those negative thoughts on black and white, and you can see, sure, where's my thinking going? Because of course our thoughts influence our behaviors. That's how we live, and if you can pick up those patterns, it's a bit easier to deal with it. Then like I said, the support network is a big coping mechanism. And then really the general rule of thumb is any activity that fulfills you as a person, whether that is gardening or reading a book, or entering for a race, or going for a like a facial or something that makes you feel good, that just distracts you a little bit. Those are often effective. Yes, I know teenagers like watching series, and that's a big part, but it does work to a point, but you can only escape in it for so long, and then you have to deal with the emotions that come with it. And sometimes when you are feeling down, watching a movie, a sad movie, is not really the best way for you to feel uplifted, or to get yourself to a point where you can deal with it. And then, yeah, some of the symptoms of depression, obviously, Prudence, like you said, everything just feels black. You just lose a interest in activities that you previously enjoyed. There's low energy, or for some people, literally, they just cannot get out of bed. Some people lose weight, some people pick up weight, some people sleep more, some people sleep less. Or for some, all they want to do is sleep, and it's actually difficult for them to wake up. And the moment they wake up, they can sleep for 12 to 18 hours a day, and that has a detrimental impact on their mood. It's also that you become socially withdrawn, because depression zaps you of your energy. It's just so hard speaking to someone. It's just easier to withdraw, and then that builds up over a period of time. And then for some people, there is suicidal ideation. So they start thinking of, well, no one will care if I'm not here. What will happen if I'm not here? Will anyone notice if I'm not here? And that those thoughts can then escalate. So the DSM, or the diagnosis manual that we use to diagnose and treat depression, says that if these things, any of these, persist for longer than 2 weeks, that you need to rather seek out assistance. So it's a persistent low mood, and that usually your friends and family are the first to pick up on it, that you've just lost your sparkle, or activities that you usually couldn't wait to get to do. You just, whatever, I'm not interested, I couldn't care less. So those are some of the symptoms that people with depression can experience. But again, depression is every person experiences depression in a very unique manner. And it's just being aware of yourself and checking in with yourself. How am I feeling? What am I doing today? And working from there. In the sport context specifically, your mental health is frowned upon. It's just not something spoken about at all. Or when it's done, it's again in a very dismissive way. Yeah, no, you'll feel better tomorrow. Just stretch a bit. You're probably overtrained. You're probably a little bit tired. The training session was tough. So again, it can always be almost justified and explained to a point where, even the athlete sometimes feels convinced that there's nothing really wrong with me. It was just really a very hectic session. And of course, if this goes on for 6 months or for years, it really starts affecting the athlete on an interpersonal level, but also in performance-wise. For someone who is depressed to go and train at the elite level that they do and that is expected of them, sure, it's just not. It becomes harder and harder. Some of them have the added pressures of sponsors and coaches on their cases as well. So they're just not allowed an off day. And we also live in a society where we're just not allowed an off day. We need to be at our best every day, all day. It's almost like those bar ones or a McDonald's drive-through, that you just need to be there and on it. But it's just not realistic. So in the sporting context, it's often just not spoken about, and many of the athletes will suffer in silence. When they do ask for assistance, sometimes medication cannot be given to them unless it's at a certain time of season, because some of the antidepressants has a detrimental impact on performance. So they didn't emotionally, physically by that stage as well. But we need to think of performance. So finding a middle ground where the athlete comes first, but not to the effect where it damages their career. That's where the multidisciplinary approach that we use at SEMNI comes in, where the doctor is there, the coach is there, the athlete is part of the meeting, and we discuss what is the best way forward for this athlete and to protect themselves. And yeah, I think from my side, just in conclusion, depression is something that is treatable. It's hard and it's scary. It's terrifying, but if I hear Prudence speak at the end, it just sounds so freeing, being able to say, this is what it is, this is what I need to do, and just doing it. It brings a lot of relief by just sharing, and that we can all try and just in our immediate social circles, when someone is feeling down, and you can sort of pick up this is a pattern, to try and be supportive and not judgmental, not say, yeah, but you should do this, this, and this, and this. If it was that easy, everyone would get out of depression relatively quickly. But it's not that easy. It's not that straightforward. It's not just a teenager being a teenager. It's complex, and it's hard. And as the family also, and the people around you are also affected by it, and can assist to just move you through this a little bit quicker. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Marshallise. That was very informative. And it's true, you see a lot of junior athletes. I mean, I've been involved in sport development for the past 10 years. And, the kid was performing at their peak and suddenly they're not. And the coach is yelling at this kid saying, but that is something that you could have done. And what's wrong with you? And is it because you're a teenager now? And it usually happens a lot during that transition period, when 13, 14, 15, it happens a lot around there or the child just loses interest in the sport that they loved. I mean, a kid that's been there through it all just loses interest. And it's so important, I think, it's so important that, especially at the development level as well, we start getting coaches to understand that depression is real and that mental health needs to be taken care of. And in order for me to perform at my peak, I need to be able to take care of myself mentally as well. And from that age, because by the time they get to 10 years later and they start seeing black, like Prudence was now seeing black, that some of them, it's no return for them. And you lose an athlete forever, and it's somebody who could have been the next world champion, but you've lost them forever purely because it was not treated, it was not spoken about. Parents didn't understand it, and parents just felt that the child was just being a teenager, as they call it. It's always that's always the thing. It's like, he's just being a teenager, she's just being a teenager, but it's not. And I think also, with parents who are involved in sport, it's very important for them to start understanding, and we really need to, as sports administrators, start doing a lot more when it comes to mental health, especially at development level, so that by the time they get to professional athletes, they're able to talk about what they're going through. They're able to say, I need help, can you help me? Instead of just dropping out and getting involved in substance abuse and all other things that they do get involved in. Thank you very much. I just want to say to you, I know a lot of people missed the beginning of the session. I've got a comment here from Carol who says, this is such an important topic. I'm sorry I missed some of it. Once the session is done, the entire video will be available on our Facebook page. So yeah, you haven't missed much. You haven't missed much. You haven't missed it because you can still go back and review it. So I think we're going to go to Alyssa. We're going to speak to Alyssa a little bit. And Alyssa, who, I mean, you moved from 100, 200 meter athlete to a sevens rugby player, spends a lot of time also just educating young women and empowering young women with regards to, them empowering themselves in sport. Look, you've dealt with a lot of injuries in your career as well. And I don't think it was easy for you mentally to keep getting up and saying, I'm going to beat this and I'm going to be better, or I'm going to come back as a sevens rugby player, or I'm going to come back and win that 200 meter race. So yeah.
Hey, Munira, and everyone else on the call. Yeah, again, thank you also for having me part of the panel. I think, like you said, this is an extremely important topic that a lot of people don't speak about. And obviously, within my lengthy career as an athlete, I've never heard people speak about this topic, and how mental health actually affects athletes. And because we don't really hear people speak about it, athletes don't really know when to identify them being in that space, in that space of maybe borderline depression, maybe just in a dark space, maybe in a space where they don't know how to deal with their thoughts and their doubts, and it's really impactful on our sporting career. So just for me, I've been in sports for, I think, over 21 years. I started at a really, really young age. I think I started racing at 4 years old. First time I represented SA, I was 12, and I went to Australia to represent them. And obviously that was my goal. That was my dream, is to just be a professional athlete. That's all I knew. That's all I wanted. And I think I did pretty well. I won most of my provincial races. I won a few international races. And I believed that I was going to be a great athlete on the world stage. And the Olympics that was coming up was 2012 Olympics, So at my age, I think I was 17 around then. And I knew that that's the Olympics that I can realistically make, because at that time I was beating senior athletes and I was running really well. So I had it already set in my mind that that's the Olympics I'm going to be at, and I'm well on my way to this Olympics. And I didn't focus on anything else. Like, I was in school and everything, but all I wanted to be was an Olympic athlete. So even my education, I was doing well. I was doing okay in my education. I was passing my grades, etc. But in my mind, it was just about being this Olympic athlete. And in 2009, I raced in Mauritius and I tore my hamstring on the 200 meters. So this was my first real injury that I faced. And I started racing when I was 4 years old. So this is like a whole good, 10 plus years later that I'm facing this injury. And I really never knew how to deal with it, because I grew up in Riverlea, Johannesburg. So it's a very rural area where, we're not exposed to people with knowledge or coaches with knowledge that can guide you in the right way. So I was just a young girl with talent, basically, and a dream. And I was chasing this dream. So when this injury happened, it was very different, and I never knew what was going on. I thought that, yeah, I was a really fast girl, and all of a sudden I can't run anymore. And my parents, very supportive, they took me to see numerous doctors. I think I saw over 10 medical physicians in different industries, from a GP to a biokineticist, physio, sports specific doctor, all of them. And then eventually, because we couldn't find out what was wrong, for about 7 months, we're trying to figure out what was wrong with me, because literally I went from winning every race that I ran to not even making a final anymore. And my mom said to me, it has to be a mental issue, Alyssa. This can't be possible. So she took me to a sports psychologist, and they couldn't identify what was wrong with me either, because I was extremely passionate about being a sprinter. They identified that I had the passion, I had the purpose, I knew what I wanted, and I just wasn't getting it. And eventually we figured out that I had an issue with my cam bone in my hip, and I had to go for my first major operation in 2011. So obviously, from being this young girl, having this dream that I wanted to achieve and putting all my energy and focus into this dream, and now having to go for operation a year before Olympic Games, that completely destroyed me. And I had to deal with a lot of, mental issues, but I never ever knew that I could have been in a state of depression or something like that. I just basically, how I dealt with it is I withdrew myself from the sport, number one. So I never watched track and field. I never spoke to anybody from the sport. I just completely cut that out of my life and I moved on. It was in 2010, obviously, that the year of 2010 and 2011. So I partied a lot. I was a typical student. I drank a lot. I just completely cut myself out of my normal lifestyle that I would live, which was very dedicated. I trained a lot. I ate well. It was very purpose driven. And I just completely flipped the switch, and I was just not myself. I was completely lost. I turned to things that just to kind of hide or hide me having to face the situation. And I partied, I drank, I still finished my studies, I started working. And that took me about 4 years post-operation. to deal with the post-traumatic stress. Like, it took me a good 4 years where I had to go through a lot of different stages, from just completely turning away from the sport to drinking to partying, then to dealing with it and crying a lot. And I'm very spiritual, so I questioned God a lot because I just couldn't understand. Like, I grew up in the church, I went to Sunday school, I was a good girl. Why are you taking this opportunity away from me? So I went through a lot of different phases within me dealing with it. And it took me a good 4 years before, I got over everything. And eventually I realized that, or I got to a point where I was ready to go back, and I was ready to basically chase my dream and my purpose again. I went back in 2015 and I trained basically the whole year in 2015. I trained because I want to be an Olympic athlete. So I decided I'm going to put in all the effort. And I trained throughout 2015 and 2016. I made it to the Olympic Games, obviously. And, but when I was going through this confusing stage, I never ever had the guidance. I never had obviously at Tuks, maybe if you're a Tuks athlete, you have access to the Tuks psychologists, etc. But I never had access to these things, and I never even knew how to approach dealing with the mental stress that I was going through this process. And I literally just had to, go through these phases, which took me a very long time, 4 years of my life, to actually figure out how to deal with it and how to move on from it. And I think it was about a lot of introspection and learning about myself and how I work, and figuring out different things about myself as well. I had to adapt a lot. So I had to go from wanting to be a professional athlete, then to having to finish my studies, then going into a working environment, because I worked about 4 jobs in that 4 years for different companies. And then getting myself mentally strong again to go and race again. And when I started racing in 2016, I had zero confidence in myself, and I never knew if I would win the race, lose the race, make Olympics. But I was in a space where I did not put that extra pressure on myself, because people, again, like Prudence spoke about expectations. I was fast for so long, people was expecting me to be great in the sport. So because I went missing for 4 years, there wasn't that expectation. And because there wasn't that pressure and expectation from other people, I didn't put on myself. And that is when I performed my best. And I basically won the races, and I went to 2016 Olympics. But then in 2017, I was denied a position in the World Champs team. And it was like a resurge of, doubt again, mental illness again. And that is one of the reasons why I made a career change from athletics to rugby, because it was just so much having to deal with all these negative connotations that happens when you are training so hard, and you do what you need to do to make the team, but then federations, whatever, just take it away from you unfairly. So I went through a process of, when am I ever going to be good enough? Because I'm training so hard, I'm achieving the times, I'm doing what I need to do, but I'm not good enough, clearly, because they still don't want to take me to the championships. And that is when I went through, again, a whole mental battle with myself, and I started performing badly again. And I just lost that passion for the sport because of what it was doing to me mentally and emotionally. And that's when I decided to also make the switch from athletics to rugby. I felt like I needed a bit of a career change as well, just to get away from that negative space and go into another space. But then again, you learn that you can't run away from what you have to deal with, in terms of where you're at mentally. Because when I went to rugby, it wasn't like the grass was green on the other side. There was similar situations there where you'd work hard, train hard, make Olympic Games, but then the Federation Association says to you, no, you're not good enough, you can't go. You know what I mean? So you have to deal with that as well. So I think being an athlete and having to deal with all the rejections, firstly, is crazy. And I think that we need to have more associations that help athletes, first of all, develop mental strength and help athletes understand how to do this. We watch a lot of YouTube videos, we read a lot of books, but we're athletes. All that we know is like training and lifting weights and eating healthy. We don't know how to get in touch with that mental, I went to a psychologist and they're like, just think deeply, like close your eyes and just picture yourself running. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. I need to be on the track to do this. So they expect us to be able to connect or be in touch with, those different mental exercises and stuff but we don't know, because we've never been taken through it. It's never been part of our development. So it's really hard to actually engage, that mental strength. And I think a lot of athletes struggle with that. Like, how do you mentally prepare yourself to race at the Olympic Games? I don't know. I don't know how to mentally prepare myself to race against the fastest woman in the world, and because we have never been taught that. A lot of the times when we travel, I mean, at the Olympic Games specifically, when we traveled, and I spoke to athletes from different teams, they had psychology sessions factored into their training program to get them ready for their race or their match or whatever they have to play. And I'm out here and I'm like, geez, I'm dreaming about it and I'm thinking about it, but I don't know how to get in touch with that. I don't know how to, ignite that mental power and strength before I go and race. And I think that we're just not exposed to it enough. I think certain teams and especially from individual sport, you're not exposed to it. And if you don't have someone, exposing you to it, then how do you actually develop that mental strength? And I think that was the really tough part of my athletic career, is dealing with it. And I only learned it at a later stage, after I was 25, 26, and that's late in an athlete's career, like to learn to deal with all of these adaptations and rejections and disappointments and all of that. So that's why I speak about it as well, because I want athletes at the age of 13, 14 to develop that capability of accessing their mental strength and believing in themselves and having enough confidence. So it's really hard. And I think also staying relevant in this time, because if you're not going to be achieving at a the results, whatever, you lose your sponsorships, you lose the opportunity to race. And once you lose all of these things, you have nothing. Basically, it's like losing your job. So you're not getting paid anymore. You can't put food on the table. You can't further develop yourself because you don't have money to pay a coach or to get the correct supplements, to help you develop in this way. So staying relevant was really hard. And I think for female as well in sports in this country, to stay relevant is really hard because they don't see females being marketed in our country for sport. It's a male's world. Males are more marketable because males can have their tops off. Males can have muscles. Males can look, strong and be powerful. So it was really also hard to stay relevant within the industry. But I think I looked at it from a point of view where I knew what my purpose was, and I still know what my purpose was, and it's more to use myself and my career as an example for younger ladies, so that they can learn from it and they can confidently achieve their dreams and their goals, and that's the way I looked at things. And I also spoke to a doctor once, and he said to me, Alyssa, you gotta push through the pain so that you can exceed that threshold. So every time you're going through something, every time you feel like you're very low or you have the injury pain or something's happening, that's when you got to push through it so you can elevate your threshold and your performance can just become higher and higher and higher. And that's an outlook that I take on it, and that's my long career in a very short nutshell.
That is amazing, and it's true. I think, and I'll say it again, I think as sports administrators as well, we really got to start doing more when it comes to that, so that, as young as you are, you understand that if mentally I'm not coping, I need help, and it's okay for me to get help. It's okay for me to speak to somebody, and it's also okay for me to have a bad day, and how do I move on from that bad day? Because we have bad days and we get stuck there and we don't know how to move forward from there. And it's important that we are able to do that, but it's also important that we understand that we need help and we need to ask for help, and we need to be able to find the mechanisms that work for us, because what might work for you might not necessarily work for me. And how do I make it work so that I get to feel better about myself and I get to heal and I get to understand that it's okay for me to have a bad day and get up the next day and say, okay, let's do this again, And also, I mean, something very important you said was that you live your purpose. You know what your purpose was, you know what your purpose is, and you've never swayed from that. And that also kept you going, So I think that's very important. Sorry, we've lost Marcelis. She's just had an electricity outage, which everything's gone dark. So she's going to try and come back into the session, but we'll carry on from here. KG, thank you so much for changing your training session around to accommodate us. Really appreciate it. She is SA's #1 wheelchair tennis player. Started at the age of 20. And world number 7, KG, world number 7, am I correct here? World number 7. But I'll allow her to just take us through. But more importantly, what we would like to get out of you from the session is, how do you manage to keep just getting on top, like, through the ups and downs? I mean, I know there was at a stage where you had no sponsorships, and at that stage you were number one in South Africa and number one in Africa, and still no sponsorships, but still managed to put the results out there. How do you? I mean, a lot of people would be like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. It's okay. Let me move. Let me try something different. I'll hand it to you now.
Thanks for the opportunity, Munira, and good afternoon to everyone. For me, I would say fact that when I was introduced to sport at the beginning, it was like, a hobby. So I thought it's something that you need to do after school and keep busy. So I didn't know anything about sports, Olympics, Paralympics. So for me, it was just another activity to do after school. So it was more like a hobby. And when tennis came into my life, it was very late. And I also treated the same way, and also because they forced me to do it. So I would say what actually, carried me through the up and downs of my tennis career is simply because, for me, tennis, I never took it as a career. I took it as a hobby. I loved playing tennis, and whenever I'm out there playing, it keeps me sane. So for me, being out there and, just being active on its own, it's something that, keeps me going despite all the challenges, having to be out there in a tournament, no coach. But the fact that I'm playing tennis, it was good enough, and it's still good enough. I think Alisa mentioned something really important, that, lack of development in terms of, mental strength. That's what play a huge role. I mean, I never had that. I didn't even know that at some point you have to deal with the sports psychologist. Even when I go to the sports psychologist and trying to talk to her, all I tell her is like, no, I want to win more matches. And she keeps telling me it's all in your head. But I'm like, where is in my head? I mean, I work so hard. Why can't I just win? Because when I'm out there practicing, these things are, looking good. I just want you to help me how to win. And I think Alisa made it a very good point, that they make you go through all these exercises, play tennis in your head, and sometimes you're like, but how? Just because you don't have, the development of that. So it's really, really difficult to get the catch of that. So for me, I think what actually kept me going despite everything is simply because whenever I was introduced to sport in the beginning, it was just like a hobby. It was just something to do to get through the day. And I found that really, really, really fun. And yeah, for me, it doesn't matter how things are, how tough they are, but the fact that I can get an opportunity to go out there and play, that's what keeps me sane, to be honest. And I really don't want to lie. And yeah, even when I didn't have sponsors, I felt like, oh, so this might be the end of the career. But I still woke up every day and go practice, because like I'm saying, just playing sports on its own, it's what keeps me sane. And I think that's how I managed to actually, survive through the tough times of my journey. I mean, even now during COVID, I think that's where it really hits me, because I couldn't get the opportunity to be out there and play. Now I feel like there's so much time in hand. Like, what do I do? So maybe that's where I would be like, it got hit me too hard mentally, because I didn't know what to do completely. And I started speaking to my psychologist, like, how do I kill time? And she just sort of helped me come up with activities to do, read, try doing puzzling, just to kill time. But other than that, I don't remember a point whereby I'm just like mentally feel like, I can't do this anymore because I don't have money to travel. I can't take the coach anywhere. I can't even afford to go to the gym. So for me, being out there and be able to play whatever sport that I do, it's something that, actually kept me going, because I find fun in that fact that I can be able to enjoy myself doing certain something. And I'm that player who wasn't, wasn't developed really well with the basics, So whenever I go out on court, I try to have fun because I played tennis my own way at the beginning, and it was just fun like that. Even, at the beginning when certain coaches were trying to make me play in a certain way, I mean, I never understood all that. So I always wanted to do something that felt good. And yeah, I think for the fact that I've always found fun in what I did, it's what actually kept me going. And it's like I could even see all the challenges that were coming towards me.
Okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it. How do you prepare for a game mentally?
You know what? I do not have to do that because I don't know how to do that. I don't have to prepare for a game mentally because I don't know how to do that.
Okay.
First time I was introduced to the sport, they gave me a racket and I just sat at the corner and watch everyone. So for me, whenever I go out there, I'm just like, go out there and have fun, just go out there, have fun. But I'm not going to be, beating myself, trying to strain my mind with things that I'm not really used to. So whenever I go out there, I go try to look for that fun part of it. Because if I get into a relaxed mode, I automatically, settle into the game.
Okay. No, that's great. And dealing with losses, how are you able to always pick yourself up from there and say, let's go another day?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning it was tough because when I played at the beginning, I played quite a lot at home, and I was getting so comfortable to be in that winning space. But then I didn't know as you improve, it gets tougher. But then I'm out there, I'm being beaten ridiculously. And yeah, it was frustrating for me, to be honest. I got frustrated. I couldn't understand. I kept asking myself, what is it that I'm doing wrong? Why can't I do it right? I mean, I've been winning. What can I win now? But like I said, simply because I didn't know the dynamics of the sport, that day will be a bad day. Tomorrow, I just woke up. It's a whole different new day. I'm really excited going back to be hitting the court. So for me, I think not having the right basics of the sport and the right development of the sport, it actually helps me to cope a lot of stuff because I don't really, expect much from anything because I really don't know. No one taught me how to hit a forehand, Someone just gave me a racket and said, start playing. I started learning tennis from just watching a lot of players like, oh, so that one hits like this. So in my of my career, I was copying how other people were playing, so I just, and with all that, I found myself in Paralympics and, and as I grow into the sport, starting to understand the game better, that's when I told myself, like, I need to find who I am and what kind of a game I play, which strokes am I really playing. So yeah, otherwise I was just that person who've learned from just watching how other people do stuff. Because even coaching, I didn't have a coach until I was like maybe 24 years old, and even when the coach came through, it was so frustrating because I'm not used to anyone telling me how to play, what to do. So it was quite tough. But yeah, I'm just a good learner when I'm watching, and I think that's what's still helping me when I get opportunity to be at Grand Slam and see, your Serena Williams, Roger Federer playing out there, how much they stay composed. I learn from that because I think that's a quick way for me to learn. But when someone's trying to talk to me and instill all these things, it just becomes frustrating, and I become so dismissive about it. I don't listen to that because I'm just like, I started from nowhere and I got it right. So why do I have to, confuse myself at this stage, but rather keep learning on getting better from other people?
Okay, thank you very much. Ladies, I have a question. Unfortunately, Marshallise is not able to come back into the session. I've got a question from who's at Promotion Sportswear, who says, how does a sports psychologist break into the field? The coaches seem to have a mindset of you are not messing with my kids. A sports psychologist helps build a team or assists with mental strength and overcoming mental blocks. How do you change that mindset in South Africa and where it is quite new in the general sport field? And it's true, I think, like Alyssa, you touched on that as well a little bit, and Marlies also touched on that a little bit to say it's difficult. And I guess at Tux with Semley, they have that approach where you bring in the coach, you bring in the manager, you bring in, the athlete, and the sports psychologist is there. But what advice would you be able to give to say, how do you break into it? How would you be able to break into it? I've already said, as administrators, we need to do more, and we need to create a lot more awareness around it so that it's not a taboo topic. But how? I mean, or how would you have expected that kind of assistance very early on in your career?
So I think basically it needs to become more of a norm. Like, it's normal to have a coach. It's normal for there to be a team manager. It's normal to have a physiotherapist or biokineticist. But like Prudence said earlier, if you see a psychologist, people have the stigma that there's something wrong with you. And I think there's no change when it comes to the sporting industry. For athletes to go see a psychologist as well, people are like, but what's wrong with you? Just race, just run, or just play tennis, or just do what you're supposed to be doing. They don't realize or identify the mental component within your sporting career. It's basically you're physically okay, you have no injuries, you're in good shape, just play the sport, but they don't take into account what or the impact of your mental strength. You can be physically in the best shape. You're running really well, you're training really well, but you maybe have this, fear of race day. Maybe it's the fear of the gun. Maybe it's the fear of someone in the audience. Maybe it's the fear of having your mom watching you race. That is all mental components that has an effect on the result. You understand what I'm saying? So I think if maybe we introduce it at a school level, whether it's a high school level, so it's normal. It's seen as a sports psychologist should be part of your essential team in order for you to, unlock the greatness in you. I think that is where it becomes an issue. And speak about it more, educate coaches about it more, educate parents about it more, educate administrators about it more, and the impact that sports psychology can have on the career of the athlete. I think that's where the problem lies, where people still see it as you seeing a psychologist because there's something wrong with you.
KG is fortunate she has her own psychologist, so that's cool, eh? That's like really, really cool. Prudence, what advice would you be able to give? I mean, so as somebody who's like been through this and as somebody who's been the overachiever, what advice would you give for sports psychologists to start getting involved at that amateur level, at that grassroots level?
You know what, Munira, it's actually been great to hear from the professional athletes, Eliza and Khothatso, as to what they go through at that professional level, because I only played sport at a school and university level. And as we actually having this conversation, I'm having those thoughts that actually, why did we never have this, like from a school level? Why? Because I'm listening to both the ladies, and I'm seeing how important it is to have a psychologist even at that early development stage, so that, of course, I mean, as South Africa, we can produce such great athletes. I mean, for the mere fact that Khothatso and Elisa have achieved so much without having that backing shows that clearly, as South African athletes, we are really like at a level of our own. So imagine if we had that psychological assistance as well and support. Imagine the greater heights that we could go into. So yes, I mean, that's something that I'm actually picking up right now during this conversation, that it's something that is so needed. It's so needed because I know, okay, the school that I went to, we did have a psychologist, but it was never for sports. So it was for everything else, like how they would pick up when the issues with the students, especially when it's during primary school, when you're drawing and then you're drawing crazy things, and then that's when they'll pick up that, okay, there's something wrong. But never in terms of the pressure that athletes go through. And I know that even at school level, whereby you've got boys' schools, in boys' schools where there's rugby. I know that rugby at a school level, especially in high school, is insane. Students go crazy. You know, they literally are on the borderline of literally just giving themselves off near death experiences, sometimes even going through that where they injure themselves with hectic injuries because they're trying so hard to be the best, the pressures that they get from parents as well. So again, in terms of the psychological element, it's the same. I mean, it's very similar to what I went through, even academically, because it started there. That's where everything started, that academically you are pressured, in sports you are pressured, there's this and that expectation. Because as I'm listening to the conversations that the ladies are talking about in the life lessons they went through, the coaches, I recall I had this insane coach when I was playing basketball. He would put so much pressure on me. And I would always ask him, like, but why me? Why are you focusing so much on me? There's so many other players on the court. You are like always screaming at me. When I go into the court, you're always screaming my name. So it doesn't make sense. How do I focus when you're busy screaming at me? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And he would tell me, like, no, I see so much in you. But I just didn't get it. I just didn't get it. But also because I had an older sister, so she had already done well. So I was expected to also be like literally walk in her footsteps. So it's also that those pressures that you're expected to be something and someone that you're not. They didn't allow me to walk my own journey. I was now supposed to be like her. So yeah, I really, really, really believe that I don't know who needs to be told and who needs to be convinced, but definitely we need to have psychologists at a school level, at an elementary level, so that when we get to the professional level, it's something that athletes are in tune with, because I mean, I look at myself and how much going through the psychological assessments and treatment and being in hospital and the antidepressants, how much it has helped me now later on in life, and how those lessons, even if let's say I didn't take antidepressants, the lessons that I learned writing, I mean, if you're a school going kid, those little things could have helped, like writing. I mean, as girls, we wrote our diary, like in our diary. So those were the type of things that we could have been told that, okay, when you're going through this, write in that diary. Don't only write about the boys and all the other stuff. So it's that mental training
Yeah.
that is needed. And definitely, I'm actually shocked that we don't have it at this stage in 2020. Why are we so behind? Because I know that in some schools in the US, I know there's this school, what is it? It's an American school that's based here in South Africa. They had everything. They had psychologists, they had this and that and that, and then they would come and play. And you're wondering, who are all these people that you're coming with? We only have a coach, and you have an entire team. And that's why they excelled so well. So I really do believe that you, Manira, please make sure that this is a conversation that is had at the highest level, so that it's mandatory that athletes get that support from a young age, because that's what's going to build them. Again, I mean, sporting injuries, especially in sports like soccer, whereby you know that your career can end just like that. It's not a long lasting career. Anything can happen. I recall there was the young player, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, was involved in an accident and his career ended just like that. So the question was, who's going to support him psychologically? I mean, he was playing in the PSL, everyone knew him. The spotlight is on you. Now you can't play. We say goodbye to you, we forget about you, life goes on. What is happening to him in the background? The last thing we need is to have a front page cover story that he committed suicide. So it's a lot. And also, Elisa and Khotato, the pressure and the expectation that we want you guys to go to the Olympics. I mean, you know how the country goes. We just want medals. We don't care about anything. We just want your medals. If you don't bring the medals home, we don't come to the airport. So, yeah, we're not going to come to the airport to welcome you. You didn't bring the medals. So who assists you mentally and psychologically through that? Because yes, as the supporters, we actually don't even get to that level. We just don't care. We just want what we want. If we don't get it, that's it. We just check you out. So yes, I really believe that we need to have these conversations at the highest level in sport to ensure that our athletes are supported from a very young age, even at a national level, so that it's mandatory. It's not an option. Because again, I think the other problem is that in terms of the athletes, I always look at it that I went to a private school. So basketball was mostly available in private schools. So you see, again, it's so unfair that you get certain opportunities based on how much you can afford. Why should it be that there are certain people that get access to certain things and others shouldn't? So you'd find that obviously athletes that do have the money can then afford to have a psychologist, but then the athletes that don't have money cannot afford to have a psychologist. Why should that be if both the athletes are expected to perform at the same level at the Olympics? It's unfair. So we really need to find a way to make sure that we speak to the powers that be, that it should be mandatory, not optional, and it should not be based on who's got the money, because we cannot go into that conversation right now, especially with women. I feel that women in sports, oh my gosh, really, it's something that we know is an issue from grassroots level, the sponsorships, just the whole attitude towards professional sport among females and the lack of support that it gets, the lack of sponsorship. It's just insane. It's insane. Also, the televising of female sports, it's always the last option, or they want to put you early on in the day or in the morning when no one is watching, and then in the evening we must all be watching males. And I'm sorry, but you'd find that these males are not even performing. Like, why must we do that? So again, it's those type of things that affect us psychologically, because I know with myself, in school, I was told that I should actually pursue basketball professionally. And I thought, what? Are you crazy? I'm not about to become broke. I don't want to be broke. What do you mean I'm going to pursue it professionally? You see, that's the thing. We already know that we're not going to get the support. So I would never pursue sport professionally, because we know that financially I will not get the rewards. We look at the soccer team, the national team, Banyana Banyana, for the mere fact that they need to have 9 to 5 jobs and still perform in a national team and still travel and still do this and that, when our national soccer team, the male soccer team, is only focused on that, and they still don't give us results. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And as females, we're dealing with a lot, but no one is taking care of all these emotions. And remember that we as women are emotional by birth. In our DNA, we are emotional. So it's a lot. It's really a lot. But definitely we need to introduce it at a very, very early age.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I spoke about all the politics.
Thank you very much. We actually run over time, but I'm just going to give Alyssa and Khotatso just final words, please. Let's start with Khotatso. Final words, final comments.
Yeah, I think this has been a great conversation. Obviously, people actually get to hear different stories on how people cope. So I would say well done to you for giving us this opportunity, because it makes people realize how important the mental health is. And I mean, all I can say to the people out there is just to keep going. Sometimes it gets hard, but do whatever you can, to keep pushing. In fact, that you wake up every day, you get to see another day. Let's appreciate the opportunity of life more than anything, and try our best to deal with whatever life throws at us.
Thank you very much. Alyssa?
Yeah, just to reiterate what KG said, thank you, Munira. This has been a great conversation, and also good to hear from, I mean, Prudence being from the sporting industry, but in a different industry, but facing very similar situations that we do within the sporting industry. So thank you for allowing us to be part of this conversation. And I think moving forward, we need to have more of these conversations so that we can continue to create awareness, firstly. I think that will help us implement the sports psychologist factor into our elementary school level, is just to create the awareness. I think people don't know about it. They're not really educated about it. So the more we share, the more people can learn and identify the importance and the need for sports psychologists within our school. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And just creating a young you know what your goals are, you know what your dreams are. Don't let anybody, tell you any differently. Don't put pressure on yourself to make other people happy. Focus on what you want, work on yourself, be driven, and it will happen. A lot of people change their dreams because they need to make external people happy. So try and find that purpose within yourself and focus on making that a reality. And thank you again for the opportunity, and thanks, ladies, for sharing your story.
Thank you very much, ladies. It's been a great session. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and just, sharing your experiences, sharing your coping mechanisms. And we've had a few good laughs and we've really enjoyed the session. But I think I've learned a lot as well. And it's so true that as women, there's so much that we go through, but we kind of push it at the back of our minds and we carry on. And it's like, tomorrow's another day. I need to get up. But at some point, it catches up with you mentally. And that's when you start seeing black and you don't know what to do. You don't know what's wrong with you, but you know what's wrong with you, but you don't know what's wrong with you because you feel, I'm strong. I can't be going through this. I can't be depressed or I can't be experiencing mental illness because I'm strong. Everybody around me feels that I'm strong. But I think what is key is that we need to understand that help is out there and we need to get help. And we also need to find a way of getting sports psychology to amateur sport, to grassroots sport. Thank you very much, ladies. It's been great. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Thank you all for the comments. There was a last comment about there's somebody who wanted to share a book that they wrote regarding getting sports psychology into school. You're definitely welcome to share it. Sorry, I can't get into that comment right now. I'm not sure what's going on. But yes, you're very welcome to share it. I think as much help and as much more conversations we need to have around this would also assist in getting rid of the stereotype and the stigma around mental health, and especially in sports, because Prudence is right. Yes, we want those medals, hey? We want those wins and we want those medals. And we feel that, it has to happen. Sorry, it was Dave Rubach. He says, I wrote an article recently which addresses promotion sportswear question. Do I have permission to share it here? Yes, you're welcome to share it. We need as much as possible. Thank you, Marta-Lise, in absentia. Really sorry about your electricity situation. Hopefully it comes back soon and you have electricity by tonight. But ladies, thank you very much. We'll be in touch and see if we can do this soon. And also just how do we go about empowering the community around mental health? So thank you very much. Thank you.